there really wasn't much that happened over this past weekend in terms of, I don't know, sports card news. Usually the weekends can be a little bit slow unless there's big auctions. That's really one of the only big pieces of news that end up happening. So this episode may be similar to Friday's episode. I'm going to be talking about a concept that I was thinking about over the weekend. As I was watching the U.S. men's basketball team win the gold medal. Tatum didn't play for some reason. I don't know. It seemed like an odd decision, but either way, they won the gold medal, so it's not like they really needed them necessarily. But I wondered in sports cards in general, is it better to come out with a set and to miss some of the prospects potentially that are in there because the set was planned, I don't know, not necessarily years in advance, but the set was planned and it was released? Or is it better to be able to get some of the, I'll call them the like flavor of the month type players into these sets? Like for baseball, it can be tough because it's such a weirdly scheduled season that like you never really know. And with players coming up and down, basketball, I guess this would make sense because if there are players towards the end of the year who are getting more playing time as rookies or were not really, they were a second round pick and they're making their time into the league. And I suppose even thinking about this, maybe it doesn't happen that often. So maybe that's why we don't really have to worry about it. But just, I think overall thinking of like, what's more important within sports cards, like coming out with like a timeless set, or like doing a set that is more based on maybe a moment or like a time period, similar with Topps Now. And I mean, in my opinion, I think it definitely is I think it's a balance you have to find if you're coming out with any of those sets. Because like Topps Now, for example, no one really cares about Topps Now. But I feel like if they were to, and this is maybe just a overall thought of Topps Now, I wonder if people don't like Topps Now because it doesn't come out of a pack. Like there's no pack that you get for the cards. Like I'm sure like it comes in the plastic, the small plastic container, but you're not getting like a full-on pack, which it does make me wonder if like they were to come out with a Topps Now set at the end of the year. I wonder how that would sell. And this was a concept that I thought of back like when Project 2020 was being released. I thought it would have been cool if they had released a or maybe it was a reprint set potentially. That's sort of the other idea for that for Project 2020, like a reprint set where it doesn't affect the print runs of the original product. Or they just say, well, we're going to add 10 to 15 to 20 or however many they think they could sell at the end of the year to the print run, just so that way people can have this. And it goes with maybe even the Topps Now. It's like if they were to look at the full year's worth of Topps Now, probably for baseball, most likely, just because that's where it's mostly focused. Like we're obviously going to be getting basketball for Topps Now this year, which I think is going to be pretty interesting to see how they can turn around those cards with a lot more photoshopping that they're going to have to do, or if they even do the set until they get the license, because they were able to do the USA Basketball set there without having to worry about Photoshop, really. But I think overall, and this also the other concept that I was thinking of is like, I wonder if we've gotten to a point, like I wonder what the production time from start to finish of a sports card product really is. And again, I think it's a balancing act between like coming out with a set that's actually good, that's good quality, that has a bunch of the players that people would want in there, But I think also capturing some of the important moments throughout the season and putting them in that set, like that's the other, like that's kind of the piece of it, right? It's like if they're able to wrap in some of the moments that happen within that set's time frame or whatever, but how quickly are they able to turn those cards around? Like, I don't think it's very quickly. I think they've gotten, I mean, I would imagine they've gotten better at it just because they've been doing it for so long. I would imagine they've probably got it down almost a science of like, it takes 4 months or it takes 5 months for a card to go from concept to being in production and going out the door in some sort of pack. I would imagine they've gotten it down. If not, it's an interesting idea for one or two of the sets to, I don't know, be something where it's more of a Topps Now sort of set. Like, I know that that's not really something that I know it's something that the hobby isn't really asking for. I may be the only person asking for it realistically, because I seem to talk about Topps Now a lot and I don't really see other people talking about it on the timeline, which again, I don't know. It's not something that I've seen people really talk about. So I'm assuming that means people are not super enthused with the Topps Now set. So maybe this isn't something that people would want. But I think like moments, for example, are important within the industry. I just don't know if people take the moments seriously. And I know that this is probably kind of a stretch here, but it's like, Imagine if you were able to get like a Topps Now card, the Babe Ruth hitting doing the thing, calling the shot. Like, there's that jersey that I haven't seen any other reports that it's been not real, which is there was a report over the National Week that potentially there was some weird stuff going on with it. I haven't seen any more reports. So whenever that jersey sells, I'll talk about it and I'll do some more research and I'll figure out a little bit more about it. But if you were to come out with a card, I wonder where that card would potentially sit in the realms of a Topps Now set. Would people want it? Would people not want it? I think that's where I just look at the moment. So, for example, the Topps Now basketball cards, there's going to be like a crazy LeBron James, Steph Curry, KD triple auto in there. I don't think that necessarily falls into this category because that's a no-brainer. That's an obvious card that people would want. But the photos from the game using in the gold medal game, stuff along these lines. And I don't know if they're going to do it. Like I said, it would be cool if they were to do all of the gold medal winners, if they were all to get a set. I don't know when that really would be able to come out. And that's also the piece of the timing, like with the NCAA basketball, coming out with a set of a team when they get hot, when they start, their run in the NCAA tournament. Like you're probably going to see like a team that maybe was a lower rank. Maybe they're going to have a short amount of sets, but like towards the end of the tournament, people are going to want the set. And again, that's maybe even something where Topps doesn't really care because they're not there making the money. Like once the cards sell, there isn't really a avenue for them to make any extra profit from the set. So maybe it's not even something that they're looking at. And maybe it's the concept of the moment isn't maybe something that they are 100% into for that reason. I think it would still be, I think the moment aspect of the Topps Now set, I think is probably one of the more important pieces of it. But overall, I think it would be cool for Topps or Panini, I guess, to spend more time invested in figuring out how to quickly get through products. So that way, if a moment comes up, they could almost have a whole moment as a product for people to buy and sell or buy and rip or anything along those lines. One of, I think, the best hobby sports card people in the industry is Ryan Cracknell. So he works for Beckett. He's a hobby editor over at Beckett. He put out over the weekend, or one day ago. So we're at this point, it would have been longer than that. So maybe it was Monday, or Sunday or Monday. He put out a very interesting statistic that Disney Lorcaana had said that they had sold over 1 billion cards since the set first came out a year ago. The statement basically says the panelists kicked off the season, which also maybe if you're not like a Disney content follower, like you may have not seen, this is probably a piece of the whole weekend, because I think Disney had one of their like launch weekends where they do a bunch of like announcements for new movies, and they had a bunch of big announcements for like the Disney parks. So I'm sure this was probably part of it, because in the statement it says the panelists kicked off the session by sharing an impressive statistic about Disney Lorcaana TCG success, with over 1 billion cards sold, more than 100,000 players actively participating globally, and more than 5,000 local game stores supporting organized play. And the game has taken the world by storm. The community's enthusiasm is evident. I'm not the best reader. Also, the text is kind of small here, so I'm trying to make sure I'm doing my best. With over 172,000 people engaging on social media platforms, and more than 700,000 event entries recorded to date. So Lorcaana, this was pretty much a new game that Disney was coming out with. And I think this speaks to the power of first of all, TCG in the hobby. That's, I mean, it's really pretty insane. Like if you look at like a lot of PSA's grading numbers, like if you look at like GemRate puts out their grading numbers every month or every week or so, whichever statistics you're looking at that they're putting out, the TCG is usually one of the highest, if not higher than sports cards when it comes to total graded versions of the cards. Over 2023, I believe it was more than 50%, if not higher than that, of what like PSA, mostly PSA from what I saw, SGC as well. But these companies know that TCG is important, but I don't know. It seems like maybe I'm missing it here. Maybe this could be something where I'm so focused on sports cards, I don't see them talking about some of the other products. But it seems like with TCG being so big, they would want to promote some of those numbers. But then at the same time, if you flip it, if TCG is doing so well, maybe they don't need to promote it. Maybe that's how they look at it. Maybe they say, well, we want to get the sports card numbers closer to TCG. So with the social media posts and with the promotion, we're going to focus more on sports cards because that's, from a marketing perspective, that's where we want to get those numbers up to meet the TCG. Now, I don't know about the Lorcaana's total overall graded, but I would imagine if that many people have engaged with the concept over the past year, it's got to be pretty high. And that was one thing that we saw probably like 2022, probably like 2021 until like this past year. We saw like multiple Disney card game sets come out, and there was like a Chinese company, there was a Japanese Pixar company, and then Lorcaana was, I forget if they started outside of the United States before launching here. I would imagine probably, because that's probably how those numbers are much higher. Because to think that many cards were sold in the United States, again, it's maybe something where I'm so invested in sports cards, or at least my time is so much invested in looking at sports cards that this is maybe not a blind spot, because maybe I don't necessarily need to cover it. I just think it's interesting and this is how I kind of want to tie it for sports card companies in general, is that I think the IP for different non-sports related assets could be very big for whether it's Fanatics or I think Panini or any sports card company that wants to come in and they want to try to be the TCG. I mean, there was like a Disney 100 set that came out with Topps. I believe that was a UK only set, but that was a Disney property that came out. And I'm not 100% sure. Like, this was one thing that I kind of speculated when these cards were coming out, was like, why is Disney licensing all of their products or all of their IPs in such like a short time span. Maybe it was something they were going to try, because like if I'm Disney, I would like, if you're Disney, why would you even license the IPs? Why wouldn't you just do the thing yourself? Like, why wouldn't you? I guess maybe they don't want to. That could be one of the reasons. And they said that they'll pay for the IP. But if they wanted to, they could have easily. It could have just been the Disney set. Like, it probably, like Lorcana, Disney probably could have bought that company, and that they could have just come out with the cards themselves, and they could have mixed the middleman, I guess is one way to put it. But I think, so the point that I want to make here for sports card companies is that I think that there are important IPs outside of sports that, if I'm Panini, this is really, I would almost be trying to focus a lot more on those, because they're going to be losing this. They're going to be losing basketball and football. Like, and not that they haven't already necessarily, but like, it seems like they've kind of let off their gas, or let their foot off the gas. And no, that's not the right expression that I'm looking for. They've let their foot off the gas of investing different concepts and ideas with those IPs. And they've invested it more in just coming out with as much of it as they can, because again, for them, they're not really on the hook for, once the cards are produced, like they can just produce as much of the cards as they want. And most likely they're going to be able to sell the contracts to distribute the cards. So for them, like, they may have their contracts up for NBA and for NFL. Those contracts are going to go throughout when they have those licenses. But like, up until then, it's like they can just come out with as much as they want, because most companies, I think at least, most distributors, I don't know. I don't think that's, and especially with the way the contracts work, to my knowledge at least, is like, you have to, if you want Prism, you have to get like, Prism NASCAR too, or some other type of product that doesn't do necessarily very well. So I think if I'm Panini, I'm looking into some of these other brands and other IPs, and I'm really trying to invest in some of these things, because we've seen the proof of concept with this Disney game. I don't know if they would be able to replicate that necessarily, but I think that there's got to be some other big IP, whether it's like, I don't know, Mario, or I don't know, I guess they have had Harry Potter. But like, there are other big IPs that, if they could figure out a way to financially, sustainably get the IP for those cards to like come out with it, and not Prism Monopoly, like that's not Prism Basketball Monopoly. I mean, unless they want to go that route, like if they want to go that route, then I guess that's it. The Prism Monopoly thing just doesn't make much sense to me, if I'm going to be completely honest, because like I guess I never have played the game, but unless the cards that come in the packs are the like cards you would get in the game, then it just seems like they really, I don't know, it just seemed like a half-baked idea there, really. Like, so, or if I'm Fanatics and I really want to double down, maybe I go out and I buy an IP, or I buy one of these other classic brands. Or maybe I look forward, because this is one thing that I've thought that I've liked that Leaf has kind of done, is like influencer cards and gaming cards. Like Upper Deck has the license for Call of Duty, and I believe they have the license for a couple other esports. But like, if they were to go into the content creation, like they could easily, I think that unfortunately you would have to go to each individual person probably, or there probably are agencies that have multiple different people, so maybe you get all them. But I do think that they would have to include some of those big people in there, and that would probably require an individual license, and it's probably not as simple unless Twitch, or no, I mean, I hope most likely it would be Twitch, but like, unless Twitch or like YouTube Gaming or somebody were to put into their new terms of service that like your IP is eligible to be licensed to Topps or Panini or something. I don't know. Like I said, I think that streaming, at least nowadays, is kind of like the modern day Disney in terms of like entertainment that is like there is just so much of it and it's so readily available to anybody who wants to access it. And I know that might sound kind of crazy that it's like the modern day Disney. I just think that I look at the content. Well, I call it content. I look at the things in the content, I don't know, whatever, TV shows, movies that I like. And it was Disney when I was a kid. Nowadays, it probably is still Disney, but there probably is a streaming aspect to entertainment. That's the word I was looking for, that kids are watching nowadays. And I think, like I said, it goes back to Disney was able to create this product and do over $1 billion or 1 billion cards sold. So I think it would be worth the time for Topps and Panini to look into some of these other different IPs for their companies. It is sort of wild how quickly the summer comes to an end and how within a couple weeks we're going to have college football, we'll have regular football, and then within a couple months, we will have hockey and basketball back. I mean, I think we got pretty lucky this summer. USA basketball won the gold, so we had some entertaining basketball to watch, depending on, if you like LeBron and the Steph Curry and KD, then it was entertaining. If you like Tatum or Halliburton or any of the Celtics players, then it wasn't as exciting, but whatever. So I think the thing that I want to talk about on this podcast is it's sort of, I find that Check Out My Cards puts out some good data. I've talked about this in the past where they'll put out their sales data from the past week. And I looked at the basketball, football, hockey. I don't think there's any real surprises. And I do want to talk about baseball because that's another thing where it's like, that's kind of coming up on the end of the season here. I mean, at least the end of the regular season. And from what it looks like, Bobby Witt is probably, he has a really good shot to win AL MVP right now. And he's the number one on top of the ComC baseball list. Then you got Vlad Guerrero, Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, and then Jackson Holliday. Now, the thing that I think is interesting about baseball is that a player like Jackson Holliday can jump into the top 5 of top selling players like this. He's also on the cover of Bowman Chrome this year. We got some more details on that. There wasn't anything really newsworthy necessarily, so that's why I didn't cover it on the show. But the other day we got some more images of inserts, and then we got the info about the box configuration. And I forget when I was looking, I didn't see any dates, to be honest. So I don't think I don't think there's an official date, which I'm pretty sure that's like an October-ish release, if I'm not mistaken. Like just thinking of the calendar in my head and trying to put together when products are coming out. I'm pretty sure it's this October release. And he is going to be on the cover, or one of the cover athletes. The other athlete is Corio, I think his name is, from the Brewers. I know he's from the Brewers, and I definitely mispronounced his name. But it's just interesting that like we almost had, and I think it's a tale of two sports card stories, I think, right there with Jackson Holliday and Bobby Witt, because obviously, as we've seen over the past few years, Bobby Witt has become a pretty big sports card collector. I don't know if he always was. I mean, he's still young, so it's not like he took it up as like a hobby, in his late 20s or whatever. I mean, I don't even think he might be in his early 20s right now. He might be 21, 22, if I had to guess. But he is a big guy within the sports card industry, like does stuff with PSA, works directly with Topps on projects. Like I think him and Corbin Carroll, they did a cool kind of concept where they sign cards and then they put them in their pockets during the game. So I forget exactly what they did with those cards. I think they might have sent them to PSA. They must have done some sort of Topps giveaway with those cards because there's no reason why they would keep them. I forget exactly what they did with the cards, but either way, we had Jackson Holliday, who was presumably the biggest rookie from this past year and got sent down, got brought back up. But that's kind of the interesting thing that I want to talk about with baseball. It's like there are so many, I think, moments within the sport that like allow cards to be sold at like peak values, or at least values that are higher than they were a week ago. And I think it's really one of the only sports that I can think of where that happens, because it's one of the only sports where soccer, maybe the only one, but I don't know. The conversation that I'm honestly having around soccer is that, like, I don't know if people really care about it, if I'm going to be honest. Like, I do, obviously, and that's why I've talked about it on certain episodes, or I've talked about certain topics, but just overall, I don't know. Just based on the fact that, or based on what I've seen in terms of content online and interest in whenever I talk about it, it's just not there. So there are multiple moments for players, and Jackson Holiday really kind of gave people another moment to sell those cards. Like, you would want to sell when he's getting brought up through the majors in the minor leagues, and then you would want to sell probably when he is going to be making his major league debut, which I think he made last year, I'm pretty sure. And he was an athlete that Topps held out and didn't play very well at the beginning of the season. I think he was, maybe not. Maybe he made his debut this year. I forget off the top of my head, but either way, so he makes his debut, doesn't play very well, gets sent down, then gets sent back up. And you can see that just getting sent back up, even after you get sent back down, that is another show. It's another piece of data that says that is important within the industry if you're buying and selling. The other players on this list, I mean, Vlad Guerrero is kind of interesting. I mean, I think he has lived up to his potential, to be honest. Like, he's been pretty solid throughout his career. Like, I think maybe one of his better years may be his rookie year, but I guess we'll see. I think it's interesting when you have players who are second generation, who go through struggles, who, they literally have a resource where they can say, hey, Vladimir Guerrero, like, dad or whatever, can you help me with this? I'm trying to figure this out. And they can help. Aaron Judge is another player that is so very interesting to me when it comes to sports cards, because I thought he was a player that was too old when he made his debut. Like, when he was a rookie in 2018, I think he was like 25 or 26. So he was like a very old rookie when it came to that. Like, Jackson Holiday, I'd be surprised if he's 20, 21 years old right now. Like, I know he got drafted last year. Pretty sure it was last year, either last year or the year before, when just right out of high school, where he would have been 18. So he's probably 20 or 21 right now. Then Shohei Ohtani, I think Shohei Ohtani will be a staple on this list until he retires, maybe. I don't know. I actually, even after he retires, he may still be like a staple on this list. Like, we do see retired athletes on these top five selling lists pretty frequently. But overall, Bobby Witt is, I don't think necessarily quietly having like a really phenomenal season. Like, from all the coverage I've seen, he's probably going to win MVP. I mean, he still has like another month and a half, probably all through September, to keep playing at this level. I don't know if he's locked up MVP just yet. Like, if he goes on a huge slump, I'm sure that Aaron Judge, or I'm sure that somebody in the AL has 50 home runs at this point. So like, I think he has to keep playing at this level, but it makes me think, like, is this a player? And I was trying to rack my brain, and I couldn't think of any players that are this involved with sports cards, but also as good as they are. Like, is Bobby Witt the best, like, sports card hobby player? Like, I would say maybe potentially. Like I said, I was trying to rack my brain. I couldn't think of anybody else, but like, he's one of the first athletes that's really dove into cards in the way that he has, like doing partnerships with PSA, like working directly with Topps, like really almost making it like a secondary business to him being in the major leagues. So he probably could win MVP. I guess we'll see sort of what this does to the value of his cards. Because, I mean, if he wins MVPs, there's a small list, if you think about it, of players who have won MVP. So it's like, what happens to his cards after the season? And maybe is like now a time where you should be selling Bobby Witt's cards because everyone is already anticipating that he's going to win the MVP. I think it's one of the interesting parts about this industry and the strategy of buying and selling. Like, do you want to sell while the iron's hot, or do you want to sell potentially when the iron's going to be hotter, but like at the same time, maybe that's when everybody's going to be wanting to sell. So like maybe you sell a little bit before, but it's the anticipation. And it's the anticipation and the lack of regret that you can really have, because I think one way or the other, like if you sell and it goes up, you're going to look at it. I've done this tons of times where I've sold a card and then it ends up going up in value. And I'm like, well, you know what? Someone got a good deal. Like that's kind of how I view it. Like if you sell your Bobby Witt cards now and they double by the end of the season, that's how I would look at it. I would say, well, somebody got a really good deal on this card. And that's ultimately, that's good for the industry. That's good for the industry. But it's obviously not ideal if you're selling like, I don't know, $50 cards or whatever, they go up to 100. But that's, ultimately the decision that a lot of people have to make within the industry strategy wise for buying and selling is, do you want to sell when like I think it's the old saying, this is where we'll wrap things up. The saying is the bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, I believe. And that basically is, if you have the guarantee of something, it's better than assuming that in the future you could have something else. And I don't know, that's something that I think could happen this baseball cycle with Bobby Witt Jr.
I do believe that I've had this conversation on the podcast at some point where I was talking about which cards for this draft class for the NBA are going to be more important, because, and this was a question I saw on Twitter today, actually, and it kind of sparked my thoughts on this a little bit. And it was going to be that, like, which card for Wembanyama specifically is going to be the one that people want? And also a part of it is, does it really matter? Like, because I think it might have been Collectible Guru. I'm pretty sure may have been the one that I saw the post from. They were talking about the 1-of-1 Prism versus the Superfractor autograph from Topps Chrome Basketball, which I believe the Blez brothers put out like $1 million bounty on the 1-of-1 Topps Chrome Superfractor autograph for Wembanyama. And I think it gets into an interesting sort of conversation here that is, do we want a unautographed card or do we want a non-licensed autograph card? That, I think, will be a very interesting debate over the next year or two, just because, unfortunately, I think really the only other player that we're going to have maybe a similar conversation will be Bronny. Because I don't know. The draft class wasn't phenomenal, so there are going to be, well, yeah, I guess Bronny, because he's with Topps, so I don't know how many of the other high draft picks or draft picks at all have signed with Topps, so they're most likely going to have autographs with Panini for the most part, I would imagine. So it's really a debate that can only be had across a couple different athletes, and I guess I don't know necessarily. It's an interesting concept, because also I think it will matter depending on if the autograph is on card or if it's a sticker. That I think matters. And unfortunately it could go very badly one way. I think if it's a sticker auto, I think that clearing away makes the Prism card probably the more desirable one to get. If it is on card and it's a Superfractor 1-of-1, I actually think it's much closer, and I don't know. I think because I'm just thinking like a non-autograph 1-of-1 licensed versus the 1-of-1 autograph non-licensed, which I would say I've said this in the past, the non-licensed Topps stuff is much better than what Panini has done. And then kind of the other piece of this conversation I think is to be had is, will Panini come out with non-licensed basketball and football when they don't have the license? Like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they would do something like that. I don't know. I just think it's also interesting that, like, the government or someone hasn't stepped in and be like, you can't do that, which I guess it's like, it's not that they can't come out with basketball cards at all. They can. They just are going to stink because they're not licensed. So maybe that's the loophole that Topps and Fanatics are getting around here is that they're able to not be a monopoly, not be a monopoly, because the other companies can still come out with cards. Whether people like the cards or not is not up for the legal conversation, I guess, if you will. So if Prism, for example, is going to be an unlicensed product for the next couple of years, is that just going to be Panini's best? Like, is that just going to be best for them to do? I think maybe that's a conversation that could be had, probably, is like, is it going to be in their best interest? Like, are they going to, which I think that they would. I would say they probably dial back the amount of products they come out with and really lock in on like which products are most popular, which I don't want to give Panini props here because this is maybe my idea and I don't think that they're actually doing this, but it could be one of the reasons why they're just coming out with so much product, is because they're trying to test and they're trying to see what are actually the brands. Because I think it's pretty obvious, but I feel like there's got to be one or two wild card brands that people don't really think about when they look at football or basketball cards, and they say, well, this is a brand that people didn't really, and I'm not talking about Chronicles. I think Chronicles, like if I were to choose, in my opinion, what basketball or football products would be good for Panini to come out with when they lose a license, it's Prism for sure. I think Donruss, which is going to be a Donruss and Optic. Select, I would be fine with them getting rid of Select, if I'm going to be completely honest. I think the downfall of Select is really going to be studied one day as like one of the craziest downfalls of all time. But Chronicles, I think is one that they should include, because they have the ability to kind of, when I use the term wild card product, I'm using it in two different ways. Like, I'm using wild card products and like it's kind of crazy and it's kind of weird, but like wild card product is in like people don't really know what the product is going to be. That's what I'm talking about with like maybe there's one or two wild card products that we don't know, that based on the numbers, those products are going to be in the Panini rotation. Now, they may just honestly focus on different sports or different, soccer. They have a pretty big license in soccer. They have licenses elsewhere that maybe they're just going to focus on those most likely. But if they were to keep coming out with obviously basketball and football, they would be losing those licenses and they'd be coming out with an unlicensed product. So in the future, I guess we won't necessarily really have to have this conversation in a year or two. Like, I think depending on how well Bronny plays, like, I don't know what their plans are. Like, I think it's actually, as much as I don't like LeBron, I think drafting Bronny is fine. I think they didn't really use much capital. They used a late second round pick on him. They didn't draft him, 20th overall or whatever in the first round. So I think actually bringing him in and potentially saying that he's going to be some sort of, obviously he's not going to be the predecessor for LeBron, but some sort of thing where they're just learning together, or this is just a big nepotism scam, realistically. Like, it's one of the two. Like, it's either Bronny is going to go on and be like a top 10 player in the league one day, or he is going to be he's going to be a really bad player, but he's going to keep getting contracts because he's LeBron's son. It's one of the two. And I think we're going to see this conversation had with Bronny as well, because he is going to be in Prism basketball, but he's not going, his autographs are going to be in Topps Chrome, the next year's Topps Chrome basketball, not this year's, obviously, because we have Wembanyama. So he may be one of the only other players we ever have to have this conversation with. I don't know. I hope we do. When it's a competition between companies, that's where the conversation of which card is best, I don't know. It can be kind of tough, in my opinion, to really figure out which one is going to be the card that people want. And down the road, like, this is an interesting kind of conversation where it's like, do you want to spend $1 million? Like, how would you spend the $1 million? Like, I don't know if necessarily the one of one Wembanyama from Prism is $1 million. I think if I had to guess, it's probably pretty close. But like, would you rather spend the money on and that's actually, this conversation really comes down to if the autograph is on card or not on card. Because if it's not on card, it's just really not even a conversation. It's the Prism card for me. So like I would rather spend the money on that than I would on the sticker auto for the Wembanyama 1/1. It's really, it comes down to that for me, in my opinion.
As if things couldn't get worse for Panini in one of their last years having the football license. Last year, they had the top 3 quarterbacks, Will Levis, CJ Stroud, I was going to say AJ something, CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. They all 3 of them signed exclusives with Topps. So I don't even remember if Topps really came out with any Will Levis autographs now that I'm thinking about it. But I know that they were doing CJ Stroud and Bryce Young autographs throughout the year with like different types of sets and different types of cards that were coming out. And I think they might have been in certain, like I know Shroud was in like a top set, but it seems that this year, and then Anthony Richardson got hurt halfway through the year, which that's kind of the to transition from that player to this player a little bit. JJ McCarthy, who some would argue is a big player, is a good player. Some might say he's not ready yet, but regardless, he is a rookie, which means he would have had autographs, or he is going to have cards in this year's Panini football products. He, unfortunately, from the reports that I've seen, is going to miss the entire season because of a torn meniscus that he caught in like the first preseason game, which is, I mean, if you're Minnesota, that's probably pretty tough, but like, I don't know. I'm not even sure if he would have been your starter there. I guess maybe eventually down the road, maybe he would have. I don't know. I think it's similar to Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson might have been the starter for the Colts last year, but either way. And then you had the issue with the Richardson autographs, which I never heard anything after that first initial report that came out from PSA, and the autographs apparently were not authentic or something. I don't know exactly what happened there, but I didn't really hear anything, so I don't know. Maybe there was other news that I didn't see. But now JJ McCarthy is going to be the first. I think it was the first round quarterback to not play a regular season game in his rookie season. I think that was the statistic. I thought it might have been first rounder at all, but there's no way that could be true, because there's no way that it would just be a random player. It had to have been probably a quarterback, realistically, based on the statistic, which I think that this could go 2 ways for Panini. Actually, no, it could go 2 ways for what's going to happen to his cards, not to Panini. I don't think Panini really cares one way or the other. Like I said, like I've talked about in other podcasts, once they sell the product, I would imagine it's for them. They're moving on to the next thing. So it's like they can't even really worry about something like this. But for the market for his cards, potentially, it will I think it's either going to have a positive or no effect at all, if I'm going to be honest. I don't really see it having that much of a negative effect, because the people that liked JJ McCarthy are still going to like him regardless of whether he was injured or not. Like usually in rookie years, the quarterbacks, obviously we saw Shroud last year. Shroud have a phenomenal rookie season last year. But the majority of rookie quarterbacks don't really have a great first year, I would say. It's got to be below 50% of the quarterbacks that end up having a season that was worthy of looking back on throughout their career. But the positive aspect of it might just be that, like I said, the people who like JJ McCarthy, if they like him, this isn't going to change their opinion on him. Just because he misses the year due to an injury, that's not going to change it. I also think that if we see rookie quarterbacks do poorly, that his cards could see a little bit of a bump, because it's going to be the same thing that happened with during COVID when players weren't playing. It was just all speculation. Like people were speculating. Like I think we're going to have now a whole year worth of speculation on JJ McCarthy, which I think is a good and a bad. The good, because it's just going to be a player that maybe somebody can add to their arsenal when they are buying and selling cards. The bad maybe is that people are going to be buying his cards, and even though he isn't playing, if he turns out to not be good, then they were buying off of potential, which in my opinion, I never really think is a good plan to begin with, buying potential of a player or buying a potential of a player who hasn't shown anything. Let's just put it that way. Now, granted, J.J. McCarthy did also just win the national championship, but we've seen tons of national championship winning quarterbacks. Mac Jones is the one that comes to mind first off the bat of championship winning quarterbacks that don't end up turning into anything. The college game, I think it's clear that the college game and the NFL are so wildly different that your college success almost has very little to do with if you are going to be a good NFL quarterback. And I know it's not the same thing, but like Bailey Zappi, for example, he has the record for most touchdown passes in a year, and he's like the third string quarterback for the Patriots. So it's like the college success doesn't always translate to the pros. So with JJ McCarthy's cards, also, I don't know if you can hear, there's a thunderstorm going on. So if that's right when I took a pause there you might have heard the thunder. But we might see people buying and selling his cards this year off potential. And I think if you're buying and selling, that's fine. Buying and holding, I think, is a pretty bad idea. I think if you are, because he's just going to have a year's worth of he could be good. That's sort of the problem. And that's what happened with COVID, like with players in COVID, especially with like Zion. And I mean, Josh, sure, he's one of the better players in the league, realistically. But for Zion and Ja, they really only got to show a little bit of their game. And then the season ended. And then we had 6 months of just potential. And then we had the bubble, which even though, that is what it is. Like, that it was what it was. I don't know if that's which way you would say it there, but like that just, that didn't really show what the players had. And then you had the off season, and that's sort of where where maybe we ran into some issues during COVID and sports cards, is like the amount of potential that every single player had. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's not necessarily one player. Maybe it was the fact that it was the whole league and the whole rookie class that had all of this untapped potential because they just weren't able to play. So I think that will also always be a lesson for me of when I'm prospecting, is like how long has this person not played at a level that I feel like is to the level they were playing at in college potentially. Like, if a player, for example, I don't know if maybe this isn't exactly the same example, but like if a player is coming up through the majors for baseball, like they're playing at single A, double A, triple A. Sure, they're crushing it, but then maybe they get to the majors and don't play very well. Jackson Holiday might be an example. There's a couple of different Red Sox players that are playing in triple A right now that hopefully maybe they'll get called up before the end of the season. Marcelo Meyer being one of the big ones. But I think looking at prospects from a sports card perspective and really deciding whether the price is actually based on how good they are, or if it's just based on the amount that the cards are being bought and sold. Like, because I think that's also a factor to look at if you are analyzing market statistics, is like how often a player is bought and sold, I think has a pretty decent indicator on, if you're prospecting, what the price can or what the price should be, versus like every player from the 2019 NBA draft class was going to go on to be the next, Michael Jordan or whatever. But that was because the players weren't playing. So is that going to happen with JJ McCarthy? Maybe. I mean, I think at the same time, I look at what happened with Anthony Richardson last year. Like, he played pretty well in the first couple games that he played, but then he got hurt and he was out for the whole season. And now he's like, everyone loves him. So it's like, if you're prospecting, I think that remembering what happened to the 2019 draft class is going to be a lesson that I think a lot of people forget most years that something like this happens. But it is a lesson that I feel like a lot of people should remember and look back on to teach them what they should be doing in the future.